can restricting blood flow to your muscles actually make them stronger and speed up recovery? Blood flow restriction training is revolutionizing the way we approach strengthening and rehabilitation. In this video, we'll break down the science behind this cutting-edge technique, how it works, and why it's becoming a game changer in physical therapy and fitness. Blood flow restriction training, or BFRT, was first developed in the 1960s by Japanese bodybuilder Yoshiaki Sato. After he injured his ankle and knee while skiing, he wrapped his thigh with tubing and did some isometric exercises to prevent his muscles from getting weaker and to speed up his recovery. It was eventually given the name Katsu, from the Japanese words ka, meaning additional, and atsu, which means pressure. The first patents were issued in 1994, but these devices were essentially a strap with Velcro. You can still find these out in the real world, but the devices used by medical professionals today rely on air pressure to more precisely control the amount of blood flow. In 2011, the US military began using BFRT to rehabilitate veterans, and since then it has become increasingly popular in both rehabilitation and other athletic training settings. But before we get into how it works, it's good to have a basic understanding of the physiology of muscle growth and why we get stronger in the first place. The most immediate and significant gains in strength are always seen by just improving the connection between your muscles and your brain. Remember, we're just a walking, talking meat sack that's controlled by the thing between our ears. The second way we get stronger is through a process known as muscle hypertrophy, which is just a fancy way of saying that they get bigger. Fun fact, we don't make any new muscle fibers. Mature skeletal muscle cells are unable to divide, and they're already matured before you're even born. What's more, unless you really have a bad injury or suffer from one of a few rare conditions, the ones you got usually last a lifetime. Technically, we do have a kind of stem cell in our muscles called satellite cells, and those can divide into another type of cell called myoblasts. Those myoblasts can fuse together with an existing muscle cell if it's been damaged, but that isn't really the same thing as making an entirely new muscle fiber. So how is it possible for a guy like Charles Atlas to go from a 97-pound weakling to the world's most perfectly developed man? If he wasn't making any new muscle fibers, then it must be that his existing muscle cells just got bigger, or hypertrophied. The name of the game is protein synthesis, and we have known for a long time that exercise is the best way to get your muscles to do that. More protein means more contractile elements, and more mitochondria to supply the energy needed for a muscle contraction. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I was always taught that exercising resulted in microscopic tears in the muscle, and the act of repairing these small tears was the reason that the muscle rebuilt itself in a way that made it stronger than before. Well, there might be some of this at play because the exact mechanism is still not entirely understood. But in 2020, Fukuda et al. Showed that hypertrophy was not only unrelated to muscle damage, but that protein synthesis wasn't directed towards muscle growth until the damage was first repaired. That means it's really the mechanical and chemical signals being sent out during an exercise that direct the brain and body to start beefing up your muscles. So if it's really just all about those mechanical and chemical signals happening in the muscle, it makes sense that blood flow restriction training might actually work if it can help create those conditions. By limiting the blood supply to an area, you also limit the amount of oxygen available to the muscle. And while that might sound a little counterintuitive, it's this hypoxic environment that is thought to kick off a whole cascade of responses that stimulate muscle growth. The biggest difference between blood flow restriction and traditional weight training is that BFRT can create those ideal conditions for protein synthesis while using significantly less weight. Traditional weight training requires anywhere from 60 to 100% of your 1 rep max to see hypertrophy, while BFRT only requires 20 to 30% of your 1 rep max. This has been incredibly useful in my world, where my patients are often dealing with injuries or recovering from recent surgeries that prevent them from safely loading their tissues. BFRT allows them to realize meaningful strength gains much earlier with less risk of re-injury. But I'm guessing that a good number of you are watching this because you want to know if it's something that you should include in your own workout routine. Well, like most things in medicine, it depends. The literature is pretty clear. Blood flow restriction is an effective way to get strong while using much lower weights than you otherwise would. But how does it compare to traditional weight training? Well, that's where things get a little murkier. As far as total strength gains, a 2020 systematic review by Kate Early et al. Showed that the best BFRT could do was match or get close to matching the gains seen with traditional weight training. But you have to remember that these were otherwise healthy individuals. If you're dealing with an injury, or you need to protect your joints because of an underlying condition like arthritis, or even if you just don't have a lot of access to weights, BFRT can be a great way to supercharge your workout routine. A 2023 systematic review by Xiaolin Wang et al. Looked at the effects of blood flow restriction on developing explosive power in the legs, and they found that it might actually be more effective than traditional weight training. This study also found that cuffs wider than 10 centimeters, or about 4 inches, were much more effective than devices that had a thinner cuff. They cited several other studies that proposed a possible mechanism that would explain how blood flow restriction could result in greater power. First, BFRT would result in earlier and greater fast-twitch muscle fiber recruitment, because slow-twitch muscle fibers are less effective without a good supply of oxygen. And fast-twitch muscle fibers are better suited for explosive activities like sprinting or jumping, while slow-twitch muscle fibers are better for the long haul, like running a marathon. They also cited another study that showed BFRT could improve a muscle's capacity for oxygen uptake and increase how effectively it was able to make use of its supply of phosphocreatine. This is the first source of energy that your muscles go to during activity before the process of aerobic respiration kicks in, so you can keep on going. Now, if this is something that you might want to try and you're on a budget, then some kind of band is going to be your best bet. A full set of high-end straps might set you back $30, but I've seen a single pair on sale for as low as $5. You just have to be a little more careful when using them. Most instructions will tell you to adjust the tightness based on your tolerance to the pressure. So if 10 is the tightest you can make it, they'll recommend aiming for a 4 to 7 out of 10, which isn't really good enough for my clinical practice, but it's usually safe for most individuals. It's important that when using BFR bands, you are monitoring your response. It's normal for your arms and legs to turn red, but they should never get blue or purple. This would be a sign that arterial flow is getting too low, and you should not experience any numbness or tingling in your fingers or toes. If you've got a little more money to spend, there are several self-contained units that use air pressure to restrict blood flow. They can accurately measure limb occlusion pressures and automatically calibrate to the desired pressure. The most frequently cited values in the literature vary depending on what you're using it for. For the arms, the recommended restriction percentage is 30 to 50%, while for legs, it's recommended to be 50 to 80%, where 100% is the pressure required to completely block arterial blood flow. Because these devices have a lot more going on than a Velcro strap, they are a bit pricey. Units that require manual inflation range from $150 to $300 for a starter set, and they go up from there. There are also battery-operated units that can take a lot of the guesswork out of the picture and the need for constant monitoring. These typically start at about $500 for a pair and just go up from there. But you also have to remember that no BFRT cuff is one size fits all. A set that's meant for the arms won't work on your legs and vice versa. In my practice, I use Saga's blood flow restriction cuffs. They have a very low profile, so movements are less restricted and are still wide enough to maximize that effect. They have a pretty long battery life. I usually get about 100 inflations per charge. And of course, they've got an app for that. It makes using it and tracking workouts a breeze. Now, I'm not getting paid to say any of that, but I certainly wouldn't turn it down if Saga reached out to me. You listening, Saga? So no matter if your BFRT device is low-tech or high-tech, or even if you're using no-tech, it's important to be strategic when you're planning your exercise routine. There's no shortage of evidence-based protocols out there that can help you decide the frequency, intensity, duration, and type of exercise that's best suited to achieve your goals. And remember, if you ever have any questions about which protocol is most appropriate, you can always ask your physical therapist. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Steven the PT Doc, and I hope this helped.